We're really honored to welcome Prof. Anita Bosch, who's the Research Chair on Women at Work at Stellenbosch Business School. She will unpack how technology-facilitated GBV is reshaping power dynamics, its impact on students, and lessons that we can draw globally. She has 28 years of experience as a higher education leader in university and business school, and also exec education environments. And she has served in various roles in the private sector, teaching on leadership and on organizational behavior. And we're really delighted to have you on board. Prof. Anita, over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Joy, and the rest of the Shared Value Africa team. I'm really, really happy to be partnering with you on this particular project. And I'll be doing a short presentation really on technology and gender-based violence. I'm going to share that with you now. Right, and so what I wish to present to you is really the idea that with gender-based violence, we have technology as an additional way of facilitating it. But let's just quickly talk about gender-based violence in general on our continent. And we know that 42% of women experience physical or sexual violence. At least that's what's been reported in their lifetimes in Eastern and Southern Africa. And that only 37% of the sub-Saharan African countries have laws that govern sexual, psychological, and economic violence in general. So that's a very low percentage. Women and girls with disabilities are more likely to experience sexual violence. And I really want to point us to the very two last points over here. The importance of gender-based violence is that it not only, and it should not, firstly, it should not occur at all. But when it occurs, it doesn't just impact the individual. And there's various terms that can be used for that individual. Some people do not like the term the victim, right? So it's who it's been perpetrated onto. But what we know is that it also has implications for productivity, well-beings of families and communities, the individuals that witness it, that are the bystanders. It has a long-lasting impact. And that's why it's something that really, really should be eradicated completely. It also impedes women's participation in education and the labor market, and it costs economies up to 4% of GDP. Now, that's a massive amount in any country, and that is an estimate by the World Bank Group. I think more importantly, where does this come from? Where does sexual harassment come from on campuses? Now, a lot of it has to do with male-dominated cultures. And I want to say here, I'm not meaning for one moment it's men that only perpetrate this. And I want to be clear about it. Harassment happens the other way around as well. But in general, it is perpetrated from males to females. And males are often caught up in a male-dominated culture that demands of them a particular way of acting, and especially a particular way of dominating women and asserting their masculinity, which is hugely unfortunate, because what we know is that that is not true masculinity. On campuses, we see a lot of alcohol and drugs being used, and that often is abused then. And then the issue of social media, which today will receive a lot of attention. It's an unregulated space, more so now with the movements in the US seems to be even more unregulated. And it allows for anonymous and unwanted expressions that can maintain these abusive patterns. There's also within education a double-edged sword, because education teaches us not to accept violence, but at the same time, when students come to campus, they very often, for the first time, out of their home environments where they may have been or received more protection, and therefore they are more vulnerable. I lastly just want to focus on patriarchy, power relations, and cultural and religious and social norms For a lot of African women, for us, it means that we have to be submissive, and that that submission may mean that we also should just be accepting of violence that gets perpetrated onto us, which we know is wrong, but our cultural norms often reinforce this, and also religiously so. Those power relations feed in from patriarchy. So let me focus then on technology-facilitated gender-based violence. What is it that we're talking about today? It is really any form of gender-based violence that is committed, assisted, or aggravated through digital technology. And so it's any digital technology, such as our phones, our smartphones, social media, messaging apps, or any other online platform, and the AI platforms that Joy has referred to there. The AI is plugged into any and everything. And so AI feels like this big concept, but it really has been driving everything. In fact, AI was part of Word, you know, the program that we've been using for so many years. AI has already been part of that program for many, many years, where it makes auto suggestions for corrections, for instance. That's AI, right? So there's very many forms of AI. And so we're looking at technology facilitated gender-based violence today in terms of how technology facilitates it. It takes different forms. For instance, and I see somebody's been writing on the screen here, so I'll take that off just now. Things like cyber stalking and harassment or bullying, non-consensual image sharing, something such as revenge porn, the online threats and hate speech targeting gender and sexual identity. So lots of hate speech being spewed online because of this, the fact that people feel that they're anonymous. The impersonation or doxing, where your personal details are shared on platforms, especially on the internet, without your consent. And then digital surveillance and monitoring by intimate partners. With WhatsApp, for instance, this is very easy. They link in, you don't know that their device is active on your WhatsApp, and so they can monitor what it is that you're doing. In terms of the prevalence of gender-based violence, there's 1 in 3 women globally that have experienced online violence. There's also what we know in Central and Western African countries, 45% of adult women have said that they've experienced online gender-based violence. And I must say, I myself have received some hate mail from people because of the topics that I write on and so forth. Now, that is just for me harassment, but definitely unacceptable. And then South Africa ranks amongst the top 5 globally for cyber harassment against women. There's also young women, activists, journalists, and the LGBTQIA+ community that are at higher risk. And it has a lot of offline consequences. So once it's perpetrated, it continues. It doesn't just stop at the perpetration. Right, so we have here high student vulnerability, and unfortunately, you know, this causes a lot of problems for us, such as, for instance, you know, the fact that students, as I've said, are out of their home environments. But I want to say something about the online environment. Often, parents might think that their children are in their rooms, and even if you're a student staying at home or student staying at dormitory or wherever you may live, in that safe environment of your personal space, often what happens is the online enters into that. And so you are not safe because you're actually out in the ethers. You're busy connecting with people electronically elsewhere, outside of the very safe environment that you may physically be finding yourself in. And with regards to that, I think that this is the biggest threat about technology-based, gender-based violence. Also, with student vulnerability, when students start having problems with their studies, or they may have relationship problems, often then it steps in that they want to use some type of platform and they want to connect with somebody. They may not have the funding to actually go to the student services. Most campuses have free student services, psychological services. Some campuses may not have the funding to do so. Some students may feel that they do not have the funding, or they're not aware of the services that are available, and so they reach out online. And this is where some of the harassment can take place. There's also an over-reliance on technology, because this is what we're working on. We're having a webinar here online, which we wouldn't have had 10 years ago, most probably. And so lots of power dynamics that happens gender relations wise, the same dynamics that play out in relationships when we one-on-one in person play out and get amplified online. The problem online is just with texting. You can't bring in body language. You cannot bring in all of the nuanced expressions that human beings share with each other. And so that makes it really, really tricky to interpret messaging. And sometimes that then sets off a spiral. And there's huge impact on students. It's emotional distress. There's lots of the academic disruption, and the fact that people drop out, and that has economic knock-on effects. There's safety concerns that you can be tracked where you go. There's a lot of apps that do tracking these days. And so you might be inadvertently tracked by somebody that you're not even aware of. And so always you have to go and check in all of your apps who else is logged on at the same time as what you are. And then also, I've mentioned this before, technology-facilitated gender-based violence just continues with the pounding that you might have received if you were in an abusive relationship. Physically, it continues. It may also ruin your reputation, outside of the campus life. So combating technology-facilitated gender-based violence is really a new area for campuses to deal with. Universities may have policies and frameworks already that deal with gender-based violence, although some are even slow on the uptake of that. There are various digital tools that are available, and on the next slide, I'm going to look at a few others. UCT, for instance, has anonymous reporting and survivor support. UJ has an internal GBV reporting system. I'm going to look at some others in other parts of Africa soon. Sonke Gender Justice has modules on training, and there's in general, as I previously mentioned, support services. However, there are many, many gaps. And some of these gaps relate purely just in terms of information sharing. Do students know about these apps that may be available, the services that are available? Many students, SRC, Student Representative Council members, don't even know about it and have to be informed. There's also got to be a lot of inclusivity. It needs to include men and women and all other vulnerable groups, such as the LGBTQIA plus groupings and so on. Funding, and this is something that we always need. This we've got to scale and evaluate the tech tools, first evaluate them and then scale them, and then also make sure that we target technology facilitated GBV specifically, because this is a separate area and lots of research that's needed in this area. So what other technology apps are available also other than the UCT and UJ platforms that I've spoken about? There's various technology, and I've done a quick search, but I must say the search for technology-aided platforms in other African countries are few. I found Nokaneng in Lesotho, which is an app that women with a panic button where you can report GBV. The Break the Silence is a Nigerian NGO that does fantastic work. It has a podcast, a Facebook platform, and it works with religious partners and so forth to break the silence on destigmatizing social issues. And then there's YouReport, which is in Uganda. It's a social messaging tool and a data collection system as well. In South Africa and more broadly, there's Bright Sky South Africa, and Chomi, which are available and gives people an opportunity to actually report gender-based violence. In conclusion, we're not aware of the scale of GBV. Because as you know, most of you in the audience would know, it doesn't get reported. We often don't report it. And that's where these apps come in to make it safer to report. Universities do realize the severity of the issue, but some of them are sort of paralyzed and don't know what to do. Some have started moving down the line with policy frameworks and so forth. Technology-facilitated GBV needs specific protective measures, and that has really not yet been developed on campuses. And then there are certain apps, but they are not campus-specific, except the UCT one, and UJ has another platform, and they are often under-advertised. As I've said in my research for this presentation, I could not find many for other parts of Africa, for instance. I'm going to stop here and I'll hand back to Joy. Thank you very much, Joy.
Thank you so much, Prof. Anita. I really appreciate that those insights. I mean, it's a powerful framing. I think you've given us quite a lot to think about, from the scale of the issue globally right through to the deep personal impact that this issue has on students and on communities. So it made me wonder a question before I release you. You spoke quite a bit about what institutions are doing, gave some really valuable ideas and suggestions. And we will later on have a panel of students who will be sharing their insights. And I wondered, in your experience, what role do you think students